This conference will now be recorded.
So joining us today is Trisha Meier, who is the admissions and recruitment specialist for the Great Lakes Maritime Academy in Traverse City, Michigan. Before working at the Maritime Academy, Trisha worked in several institutions of higher learning, working in admissions and those sorts of fields. And she's going to tell us more about the exciting program and what they do there at the Great Lakes Maritime Academy. And there you go. Thank you, Trisha.
Wonderful. Well, thank you again, Michelle, for having me. Um, I get very excited about the Great Lakes Maritime Academy because it's one of those things that is right in a lot of people's backyard and they don't know it exists. One of the number one questions that I get is, what is the Great Lakes Maritime Academy? That's the most common question I get when I'm out recruiting. And in the simplest terms, it's a college. You had mentioned I'd worked for multiple institutions of higher education, and this is one of them. However, it's not just any college. There are thousands of colleges and universities across the country, thousands of them. And there are only 7 maritime academies. So there are 6 state and 1 federal congressional option, but that is it. That's all. And we are the only one that is located in Michigan and on the Great Lakes or even in the Midwest. Okay. Everybody else, all these other options that you've got for an official maritime academy are located on the ocean's coasts, which isn't a bad thing, but it's a very different thing than what we're able and what we do offer, and gives us a really unique vantage point. So, like I said, we are the only maritime academy located in Michigan, on the Great Lakes, or even in the Midwest. We are located in Traverse City, Michigan. Woo! And as Michelle mentioned, we are getting slammed with a bunch of snow right now. So if at any point you see some technical difficulties, I apologize in advance. Now, what you're looking at here is the Great Lakes campus, and we are hosted by Northwestern Michigan College. This is the Great Lakes campus where the Maritime Academy is located. Now, we share this campus with Marine Tech and with our Culinary Institute. And as a fun fact for everybody, having the Culinary Institute, the Great Lakes Culinary Institute, and the Great Lakes Maritime Academy, both on this campus, they're actually able to provide one of only a couple official galley cooking certificates in the entire country. So it's another really unique opportunity. That one is technically through the Culinary Institute, but these future chefs do get to go out and learn about working in a galley on a ship, what that takes as far as meal planning and what types of foods you need to feed these mariners, planning in advance, weeks in advance rather than days. And so it's a really, really cool program. And not every culinary institute in the country is able to say that they've got a training ship out their back door, but ours does. So we are, as I stated, hosted by Northwestern Michigan College. Now, we are a separate academy, so someone who's just taking classes at Northwestern Michigan College can't necessarily just jump into the Maritime Academy program. That's not quite how it works. They do have to apply specifically to us, and we have to make sure that they've got all their correct credentials, like their TWIC card and their passport and all these things, in order to go through the Maritime Academy. Now you can see this is the back side of the Great Lakes campus, and we've got our ship, the state of Michigan. That is the ship's name. As a fun fact for just everyone to know how silly I am, when I first started working at the Great Lakes Maritime Academy, I knew that we had a ship. I did not know the name of the ship, but I knew that we were in the state of Michigan. And everyone just kept saying the state of Michigan needs this or the state of Michigan needs that. And working in education, I was used to the state government requiring documentation. But little did I know they were actually talking about our ship the whole time. So if you ever hear someone referring to the Great Lakes Maritime Academy, the state of Michigan, don't be as silly as me. It is our ship. That is the name of our ship. It is a retired U.S. naval vessel that was built and commissioned in the mid-80s and was commissioned for the Cold War. It was actually used to hunt submarines. Now, it was not going to catch those submarines. It was just doing the hunting and would drag sonar about 5 miles behind the ship. If something pinged, they would send those coordinates elsewhere. And when that came to an end, they then commissioned it to use with the Coast Guard as a drug intervention vessel. And they realized very quickly that she was way too slow. And so the state of Michigan, formerly known as the Persistent, was able to come and join us at the academy and be our official training vessel. Okay. Now, there are a lot of things being part of those six state academies that make us really, really unique. Every academy is a little bit different, and because there's so few of us, having that variety is really important. So nobody's way of doing it is wrong. I'm just incredibly biased and find that all the things that make us unique make us even more important and even more incredible. Now, for starters, on those unique features, we are the smallest academy by far. Don't quote me on these exact numbers, as these were pulled from the internet, as I only work in admissions for our academy, so I only have access to those numbers. But the student body of Texas A&M, and I'm going to go back to that screen for everyone so you can go along with me. So we'll go in order. The student body of Maine Maritime Academy has about 889 students enrolled. Massachusetts Maritime has 1,271 students enrolled. SUNY Maritime has 1,543 students enrolled. Texas Maritime has over 2,000 students enrolled in their maritime specific program. The congressional option, USMMA, also known as Kings Point, has almost 1,000 enrolled. And then there's us, Great Lakes Maritime Academy. We have approximately 240 students enrolled. So we are by far the smallest of the academies. We bring in 60 cadets each fall. That's it, and that's all. I get asked pretty frequently, you guys are doing so well. You have a great reputation in industry. Everyone wants to hire your cadets. Why don't you open up enrollment and make more of them for us? And the truth is, we know how to do what we do really well. And we have such a great reputation in industry because we have that one-on-one connection with our cadets. They all get time at the helm. They all get time turning the wrenches. And they're not having to fight through 500 other people in their class to get seen. Whether they're doing well or whether they're doing poorly, our faculty and instructors all see them. They all get to make eye contact and get to experience these different pieces that we provide. So that's broken up, and we'll talk more about it later, but between two different tracks within one major. But again, we only bring in 60 cadets each fall. That's it. Now, our cadets do come from across the country, and this is another thing that really surprises people because we're located right in Traverse City, and a lot of people in Michigan don't necessarily know that we're there. So to them, the concept of having people come in from Alaska, Florida, Illinois, Virginia, and these are all directly from our fall 2024 class. Just to give you guys an example, Connecticut, Maine, Ohio, Oregon, Washington, Montana, Louisiana, Mississippi, Arizona, Colorado, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Maryland, both Carolinas, and of course from Michigan. So we get people really, truly from across the United States. They come in all ages, shapes, and sizes with a wide variety of backgrounds. When people think of starting at the academy and they think of starting a college program, they generally have this misconception that you have to be at the start of your life. Now, we do enroll traditional students. You can see that in our fall 2022 incoming class. You can see the young ones there. But our average age of enrollment is actually more like 27 to 30 years old. And the reason is that because we also enroll people in their 40s, 50s, and even 60s. If you can pass the Coast Guard physical, which is mostly about safety, they can enroll with us. So whether it is your first, second, or even your third career, we are open to making that possible for you. Now, we have people who come from all sorts of backgrounds. One of our recent graduates, she was a camera person for The Walking Dead. We've had retired professional basketball players. We've had people who were part of the police. We've had auto mechanics. We've had all kinds. You name it, and people will come into us. Because the truth is, if you're someone who loves being on the water, you love ships, if you go boat nerd every time that you see a vessel on the water, that never really leaves you. And so we have people who, regardless of their age, have always wanted to work on the water. And so when they get the opportunity, they enroll in the academy because it's going to allow them to be an officer faster. And they come in, invest that time and money, and then get to work what's hopefully their dream job, which is pretty cool. Now, we are the lowest regimented of the academies. And a lot of times, the other academies have really closely affiliated military relationships, and cadets of any age may experience that at the beginning they're going through a boot camp-like environment. We do not do that. Yes, we have a relationship with the Naval Reserve Program, which is on the screen, but it is not required. Okay? Our cadets will wear uniforms. That is required. Their uniforms will be black on black on black. They're pretty simple, with a white t-shirt underneath. They will have to follow academy rules and regulations. This includes haircuts and facial hair. We had a cadet who came in this year that when he came to visit this past winter, he was an Upper Peninsula resident who had been living in Alaska, and he had a full beard. And I explained to him pretty early on that the beard would have to go. Per academy rules and regulations, gentlemen need to have clean faces unless they have some sort of medical disqualifier from that. So he was okay with it, but as we went on tour, almost every single faculty member or instructor that saw us said, Trisha, you have got to tell this guy. Do not let him come in here unknowingly going to have to shave this very committed beard off his face. And I kept telling him, I told him, he knows, it's okay. We get through the visit and flash forward to this fall. That prospective cadet became an enrolled cadet. And he showed up for orientation, and absolutely no one recognized him. He had shaved his full face down to, baby smooth or what have you, just a couple of days before our orientation. And so he was saying hello to me, and I said, you sound so familiar, but I apologize. I don't remember who you are. And nobody recognized him. So it was pretty funny. But yes, even if you have a full beard, you still have to go down to clean shaven for the academy unless you have a medical disqualifier. But whereas naval restrictions on hair are that it can't touch your ears, we have a little bit more wiggle room with that. So we allow hair to be a little bit longer. The gals just have to be able to pull it back. That's a safety issue. Different things like that. But overall, our regimentation is limited to those very few items. We also use language like cadet, lieutenant, admiral, and this is more of a form of respect. It's very common language used across the industry, but that's pretty much it for our required regimentation. Now, if a cadet would like more regimentation, if they feel they benefit or would like the tuition assistance provided by being involved, they can apply for our Naval Reserve program called the Navy Strategic Sea Lift Midshipment Program. Okay, this gives them a little bit more regimentation. Now, it's still not going to be an every single day requirement. At a lot of the other academies, cadets wake up every single morning and stand for formation. Even our midshipman program does not do that. They stand for formation usually like once a week. They have a 3-day-a-week required commitment, and then they'll have 2 additional optional days. If they feel they're falling behind, they can work on their physical fitness or on their homework or anything like that. In exchange for doing that while they're a cadet, and then the 6-year commitment after they're a cadet, they receive $64,000 of tuition assistance. And this is a huge deal because that number was actually just doubled last spring. And they bumped the age restriction up, so more people are eligible for it, which is fabulous. Now, that 6-year commitment after you graduate is not the once a month item that some people imagine. They do 2 weeks once a year for those 6 years. So you're able to navigate it with your own work schedule. You'll have a selection of dates, but it's just 1 2-week stint once a year for 6 years. And I have been told it is one of the best programs available with what you get versus what you have to give, which is fabulous. So it's a wonderful opportunity for the cadets, but again, it is not required. And that regimentation continues to be very low on our campus. All right. So from there, I guess it's important to talk about some other things that make us unique, including our pilotage license. I'll go to this next slide. But so being a pilot aboard a vessel is considered an elite position. They're a navigation specialist. And we are the only academy that is able to provide obtaining a pilotage license as part of our regular curriculum. And so out of all 7, we are the only one that can include this in our regular curriculum. That's a really, really big deal. And the reason, I've been asked this a lot, it all comes down to location, location, location. And that's because we're on these beautiful Great Lakes, these inland seas. Our training ship alone will go through at least 11 pilot-specific waterways during their summer sail. And that allows our cadets to get that experience, okay? Now, on top of that, we are also one of the only academies that our student body is entirely focused on being licensed mariners. So along with that pilotage license, our cadets are going to be licensed mariners. We do not offer unlicensed programming, okay? So our cadets that come through our program are all going to graduate with their Bachelor's of Science degree in Maritime Technology, and that's from both Northwestern Michigan College and the Great Lakes Maritime Academy. They're also going to graduate with their United States Coast Guard Merchant Marine Officer license. Now, for someone who wants to walk onto a ship and get a job, that's absolutely possible. You can go onto a ship as an OS, an ordinary sailor, and you can work your way up. The long hours, the crummy jobs, all of that. On average, it will take 10 to 12 years to get to that officer threshold. And a lot of people will hit their head against that threshold for a long time because it requires additional education and certificates that you have to get along the way. So again, on average, 10 to 12 years, it takes additional education, and you've got to do all the hard work working your way up there. Our cadets graduate with that bachelor's degree as an officer in 3 to 4 years. So already the investment of time is significant, okay? Now they are the lowest rung on the officer ladder. So they're either going to be a third mate or a third assistant engineer. They'll have an unlimited tonnage license or an unlimited horsepower license. And our deck officers will have their first class Great Lakes pilotage license. And our engineering officers will have their steam and diesel endorsement. So essentially, our graduates can sail just about anything, anywhere. And as an officer, they're going to have the better hours, the better quarters, the better pay. And being able to do it in a third of the average amount of time is significant. All right. So let's talk a little bit more about those programs. I mentioned that we offer the deck officer program, and they're going to graduate as mates. These are the people that work their way up to be the captain of the ship. They're in charge of navigation, your ship stability, lakes and river piloting. You have to manage the people on the ship, your navigational systems, and cargo. So there's a lot going on. But this is definitely the side that gets the most romanticized. When people think about being the captain of a ship, they most often think about cresting through beautiful soft waves at sunset and there's a bird overhead. And that's not wrong. That does happen. But they're also in charge of being on watch. So they're watching for those icebergs, if you will. And sometimes after a few days of being in the open water, it's not always the most thrilling, but they're going to get to experience that while they're on our training vessel, and they'll do that after their first year. So right away, they'll get the real experience to see if that's something they enjoy doing or not. Now, curriculum we get asked about a lot, especially for people who are interested in coming in from a second career. If you already have a bachelor's degree, you're eligible for the 3-year deck officer program. Otherwise, we have our traditional 4-year program. Now, when you go through a traditional college program, it's normally broken into thirds. Your curriculum will be made up of 1/3 towards your major, 1/3 towards your general education requirements, and 1/3 towards electives. And you can see on these curriculum guides that we're more 2/3 directly related towards your major. Anything that you see in black on these curriculum guides is direct maritime specific coursework. And these are readily available on our website. If anyone's looking at these going, those words are so small, they are readily available on our website as well. But the black is maritime specific coursework. Anything in green is going to be your general education work. And it's mostly there because it feeds into a class you're going to have later on, making sure you have the correct foundation to be successful in that class. And then there's a third color, and that's blue, because those are the sea projects. And we're going to talk a little bit more about those in a minute, but that is time that cadets actually spend on a ship, whether it's the training ship or on a commercial vessel. So rewinding a little bit, we've got our deck officers and then we've got our engineering officers. Now, these will graduate as your third assistant engineers and work their way to chief engineer. Now, chief engineer and the captain of the ship are the two people who run the ship. They are the right hand and the left hand. And as everyone knows, those two hands have got to work together or that ship is going nowhere. Okay? And so it's really important that we create mariners who understand working as a team, but also can take ownership for their role. And this includes, the mechanics of the ship, electricity, welding, the boilers and steam, the diesel engineering, construction, updates, all sorts of things. So the engineers stay very, very busy. Okay, when they're down in the engine room, they are changing lines, watching for leaks, checking on the operation of the generators, the motors, all sorts of items that are happening. So they are constantly checking and adjusting things, and it can make the day go by a little bit faster. So for someone who likes to work a lot with their hands and they like to stay busy, I always encourage the engineering officer side of the house. And don't worry, no one is locking the engineers in the engine room. So if you want to go, if you being our engineers want to go to the deck house at sunset and see those nice rolling waves with the bird flying overhead, they absolutely can. They're just in the engine room while they are working on the tasks that need to be done. Okay. There's also tasks on the outside of the ship that they'll work on. Again, they work as a team because our deck officers are obviously in charge of the deck. And so working together, whether it's loading materials or fixing something on the exterior of the ship, again, that right and left hand, even as cadets, have got to learn to work together. So we make sure they do. Now, these are the curriculum guides, the same 3- and 4-year curriculum guides for our engineering officers. Now, at a glance, they look really, really similar, but it's important to note that our programs go and split into 2 different tracks very, very quickly. So for a cadet who comes in as deck and maybe would like to switch to engineering, beyond their first year, that switch is going to be very difficult. It's the only downside to having such a major focused program. I love it because it means that people are getting the education they're paying for. They're not getting any fluff education. They are learning maritime right away. And that only downside is that if they change their minds, it might cost them a little bit of time. Now, in the lower right-hand corner, you'll see the red and the yellow. Our cadets will also have some additional requirements and certifications. So first aid, their proficiency in survival craft, firefighting, all these things that just make sure that they're safe aboard a ship. So we've got all these programs, all these classes, and this is a better image of our standard cadet uniforms, like I stated. They're just black on black on black with a white t-shirt. And our cadets will spend time in the classroom. They will have some traditional instruction time. But they're also going to have hands-on training in our labs, as well as on the ship. They'll also have simulation training. Cadets are required, the specific number is dependent on which program they're going through, but the cadets are required to get over 300 days at sea. And again, that is going to be split between our training vessel and commercial vessels. So they are out there on that ship helping to be a good steward of the ship, doing their student imports, and then they'll do their sea projects. So as I stated right from the beginning, we're getting them specific experiences. Obviously, we hope that no one ever needs to release a flare while they're working. But sometimes things happen, and knowing how to best get seen, how to best get help is really important. And a lot of times, if people have never held a flare before, they immediately rip it open and start waving it like they are flagging down the dinosaur in Jurassic Park. But the truth is, if you're on an inflatable life raft, that's not going to end well for you. So we make sure that all of our cadets know how to stand and make sure that their flare gets seen, where to hold it, how to move it, how to shoot a flare gun. And that's actually a really cool part of our relationship with local companies. When they have flares that are expiring and they have to trade out, they will donate those to us. And so that allows us to use those almost expired flares for practice, and then they will get the new ones for their crews. All right. Speaking of relationships, we also work very closely with the Coast Guard. Traverse City is a Coast Guard city, and we have a great relationship with them that allows us to help them practice maneuvers. This image is actually the Coast Guard coming to practice a medevac, a medical evacuation from our small ship, from our 45-footer. And these were actually first-year cadets that are in this photo. So this is not something that they just get at the end of their career at the academy. This all starts right at the beginning. And so they go out onto the small craft and they have a dummy that the Coast Guard has to medically evacuate from their ship using their hoist. Now, whenever a helicopter gets that low to the water, it creates a very strange environment for someone who's on a ship. And so it allows our cadets to get that experience and provides that learning and training opportunity for the Coast Guard. And so having these wonderful relationships with local corporations, companies, and even the Coast Guard is really beneficial to our cadets. And another question I get all the time, I would love to work on a boat, but I don't actually know anything about boats. That's okay. Yes, some cadets come in and they are from mariner families. They have all the shipping experience. They were raised on a boat, but we also have a huge majority of our cadets who come in with limited to no experience, and that is okay. All of our coursework starts at the bottom because sometimes even people who learned the correct way didn't really learn the correct way, and we need to make sure that they can do it the way that is required by the Coast Guard and by MARAD and all these governing bodies. So sometimes we have to unlearn a couple people. But that is why we start at the bottom and make sure that we've got everybody with the same solid foundation. This is just some photos of our cadets doing different things, even eating on the fantail of the ship when the weather's nice. We put some picnic tables out there. As mentioned, we do have traditional classrooms as well as lab space, and the cadets will be working on our variety of vessels. They do get to spend a lot of time on the water. And then we also have that simulation space, like I mentioned. Now, this is a little bit of an older picture because we actually got our console updated. We're the first of the academies that has the new console, which is pretty great, but our screens are set up like a deck house. And this is our deck house simulator and then our engineering simulator you can see in the corner. And this provides our deck cadets the opportunity to practice working in a team. And it's less about your skill of driving and more about how you work as a team, delegating, communicating. You're in a stressful environment. How does it go? The engine room's calling and saying that they've got a motor failure. What are you going to do? Being able to think critically under a high stress situation. These are all really important pieces that our cadets get to practice in that simulator. And the photo does not do it justice. When the simulator is on and running, anytime I take a family in there, somebody gets seasick in 10 seconds. The better that things like video game graphics have gotten, the better simulators have gotten. And so before you know it, the cadets working on these projects, even though they're on the second floor of a stationary building, will actually start rocking with the waves, because your brain does all the things it would do if you were on an actual moving ship. So it's a really cool learning opportunity for our cadets. They also have smaller scale ones as well. Now, I alluded to talking more about our sea projects, and our cadets will do a minimum of 3 sea projects in order to get the over 300 days at sea. The first one for every single cadet will always be on our training vessel, the state of Michigan. And after their first year concludes, that semester ends, 2 days later, they're going to move on to the ship. And they're going to live on that ship while it's still at port. And they're going to be there for about 2 weeks. Then the ship will make way. And this is a student-run experience. So yes, we have faculty and instructors on that ship. We're not going to let anybody crash the ship. But we are going to let them do it a little bit wrong sometimes, because they've got to learn. Just like anyone in driver's education, you learn better with experiences. And so our cadets will be at the helm, and our cadets will be in the engine room. They will be doing the things alongside our faculty. So the ship goes out and it will travel through the Great Lakes waterways, including the Soo Locks, the St. Mary's, all of these things, dealing with high traffic, different environments. And then they will come back. It's usually right after the Cherry Festival, if anyone's familiar with Traverse City. They will come back for a few days where they will make sure they have the correct provisions. Anyone who needs to get on or off the ship can. And then we'll go into another phase of sailing for the summer. And so some of our cadets will be gone all summer, and then they will go into our next semester when they get back. So once they're off of the state of Michigan, their next sea project is going to be a commercial sea project. And this is just about any type of vessel that is operating under an American flag. So it can be a shipping container. It can be oil tankers, cruise ships. It can be riverboats and even naval destroyers. If the cadet is a deck cadet and they are getting that Great Lakes pilotage license, one of their 2 commercial slots has to be on the Great Lakes. And so again, it can be any way of doing it on the Great Lakes, but they have to make sure they're going through those pilot-specific waterways. We have one cadet who graduated just this past spring, and he actually did 4 different sea projects in 3 years. And the way he told me is that every single opportunity you could want is there, and it's waiting for you, but you have to take advantage of it. So for him, he was not sure what part of the industry he wanted to go into when he completed his time at the academy. So he did the training ship. He did the commercial shipping container on the oceans. He also did a commercial shipping container on the Great Lakes. And then he also did his 4th one on a naval destroyer, because he wanted to see if he wanted to go active duty, if he wanted to continue on with that naval experience. And so he came back, and that's actually my favorite one to talk about, because he said that when it came to standing in formation, to following instructions, he, compared to his Naval Academy comrades, would be night and day. He was very obviously the one who did not snap to it quite as quickly. But when it came to actually operating the ship, working with the engines, as he was an engineering cadet, he said, I ran circles around those guys. And that was pretty awesome to hear. So he made friends pretty quickly, and they were more than happy to help him stand at attention if he could help them actually operate the vessel. Now, we also offer a tour program. This is the Pilot of Towing certificate, and it is big news right now. I was trying to decide whether to say this or not, but it's already been made public. We are in process of acquiring, well, we have already acquired, but it's headed to winter layup, so it's en route to being fully acquired, a new to us tugboat. So the tugboat featured here is one that we were leasing from a company, and starting in the spring, when we get this new tugboat after it's gone through a little TLC and a few updates, we're going to have the Robinson Bay as part of our fleet at the Great Lakes Maritime Academy. And this has actually been in process for close to a decade. They have been working on acquiring this tugboat. And so it's really wonderful. It's a wonderful acquisition. It has a ton of history. We've heard nothing but good things about this vessel in general. And so already having the tour program is wonderful. Being able to have it with our very own tugboat, where our deck and engineering cadets can learn to work with this type of vessel, is wonderful. But it is big news that we're acquiring it. All right, so when our cadets are done with their classes, we also offer industry night events where we let people from companies, from unions, alumni, anybody to come in and talk to the cadets. And this is not limited to who's graduating, who's at the end of their career. This is for everybody. So even our first year cadets can go in and listen and learn, and progressively as they go along, get more comfortable with where they would like to work in the industry. Because while it's a tight-knit industry, it's also so broad and it has so many options for where you'd like to work. We currently have an alumni who is on her way to the Easter Islands. She is working on a research vessel, the Atlantis, which is relatively famous for holding the submergible equipment, the Alvin. And as someone who's working on that ship, she's part of the ship's crew, but as she's been there, she's now also able to work with the Alvin a little bit more. So she's currently sailing across oceans and headed towards the Easter Islands. She should be almost there right now. But that's someone who's having a very unique and wonderful experience and has come in and talked to cadets multiple times. All right, now our cadet groups, I won't lie, I'm biased to our Women on the Water, lovingly called WOW, because I'm one of the advisors. Now we also have the Propeller Club, lovingly called the Prop Club, and this is for our cadets who have an interest in the deck information, the different things that deck officers deal with. But it is not required that you are a deck cadet. So maybe an engineering cadet who has an interest in weather and navigation will really enjoy being part of the Prop Club. We also have the Society of Naval Architects and Marine Engineers, which we lovingly shorten to SNAME. And again, this is a club that is particular towards engineering cadets, but it's not a requirement. So if we have a deck officer or future deck officer that is interested in working in the engine room or understanding how the ship operates, they absolutely are welcome to go to a SNAME meeting. Now, I mentioned our Women on the Water. We go to a lot of conferences for networking, and I don't want anyone to think that this is a club only for women in the program. This is not. This club is open to anybody and everybody. It is just a club that focuses on different issues that happen in the maritime industry. And there's still quite a bit of issues around growing women in the maritime industry. And the national average across the maritime industry is very low for women still, but it's gone up at least 5% in the last 5 years since we've had some new items in the industry like Embark. And so for our cadets, it's an opportunity to network, to create community, but also face and learn how to work with some of the issues that might be discriminating in the maritime industry. And so our club is actually 50% women and 50% men. And so it's really great. As far as the percentage of female cadets at the academies, now we're the littlest. So number-wise, we do not have the highest number. But percentage-wise, we are I think we are in the top 2 for the percentage of female cadets in the program. Yeah, so we are above 20%. We are close to 30%. And the only one that's got higher than us is Texas A&M, and they have a 35% female enrollment in their maritime program. And this is wonderful. No matter what academy they're at, the fact that women are growing in the maritime industry is a wonderful thing. And so we are there to help promote that. All right, so cadets can live on campus at Northwestern Michigan College. They can also live off campus because, as I mentioned, we have adults that come in. So no, we're not going to make you live in the dorm rooms with a 19-year-old. All right, and if you know someone who is interested in applying, it is very easy to go to our website, click the Apply Now button. It's free. It's online. It is relatively simple, and it comes with an admission checklist, so we do need some other documents and things. But we're actually an admissions team of 2. So it's myself and Commander Scott Fairbank, and we work with all of the prospective cadets from across the country. And we're happy to work with you no matter who you are. This is some information on money and funding. So yes, it matters a little to be in or out of state, but in the Maritime Academy, it is all considered the same. Now, I am pretty much right on the timing that we talked about. I do have contact information on the screen, but I will also turn it over to you, Michelle. Do we have any
Okay.
questions?
Sorry about that. I was so busy paying attention that I wasn't doing the stuff I'm supposed to be doing. My apologies, everybody.
At least
So
that means it's interesting for you.
it was incredibly interesting for me. So before we get to questions, I encourage anybody who does have questions to type them into the chat. I have also dropped all of the links into the chat. I'm on my own today. They've got a lot of stuff going on in Duluth at their visitor center, so I don't have a helper for links. Meanwhile, while you have a chance to think about or enter any questions you have, just cover our statuses at our visitor centers. The Duluth Visitor Center is open, which is, of course, why Sarah and Scott are unable to join us today. The Soo Locks Visitor Center is closed for the season. We will be having the open house in March. We'll have more information about that when we get a little closer to it. The other thing I want to once again promote is, of course, that next program we're going to do. It'll be Park Ranger Scott Bjorklund, who is a great history fanatic there and an expert, and he's going to be talking a little bit about the histories of the fleets on the Great Lakes, because the way that those structures have changed over the last couple hundred years is pretty dramatic, evolving from a captain owning his ship, and he is the sole power, owns the company, owns everything, to now where we have much more corporate type ownership. Of course, the cost of ships and everything else has gone up, and we'll learn more about that from Scott. And we'll give you a chance to enter any questions that you have. I have already accumulated a couple, so I'm just going to cut the line here. Um, you mentioned the Coast Guard physical standards. Do you know what those physical standards are?
So the physical standards are really about safety. And what that means is we're going to have you do a hearing test. But this is not going down to audiology and having them beep in your ears. It's a whisper test because it's really about, can you hear if your shipmate is talking to you from 20 feet away? Can you hear them without them screaming at you? Especially working in the maritime industry, when you're around loud equipment, people's hearing does different things. And so that's a whisper test to ensure that you can hear if someone's just talking to you, especially in case of an emergency. We don't want to have to scream. Now, it's in essence much like a sports physical. So another attribute is going to be your vision. It's not as much about how much you can actively see as much about your color blindness is obviously incredibly important. Red-green color blindness is the most common color blindness in males. And as you guys know, being able to tell red-green apart is incredibly important in the maritime industry. So that is not really something that we can work with too much. We did have a cadet once whose childhood doctor came through, signed his paper, and he had no idea he was colorblind until he was in classes and was like, I don't know how you all know how is this so easy for everyone? And it turned out he was colorblind. And that means that his license, he can't get licensed through the United States Coast Guard. And so the Coast Guard regulations of safety are, I apologize.
I have a dog at my house too.
Like I said, we're having a bit of a snow day. So I was supposed to be in office, but now we have a little cozy perpetrator in the background. Um, that being said, so it is all about safety. And so the Coast Guard does not want to license anyone that they cannot deem safe on a vessel. And so that's really what the regulations of the physical are about.
Okay, and so they don't have to pass like a PT test. You don't have to run a certain speed or do push-ups or swim or.
If they are part of the midshipman program and they've by choice taken on that larger amount of regimentation, they will have physical fitness standards that they have to uphold. And they'll do physical fitness together at least once a week. And so it helps everyone stay on the same page. But no, to come in, if you were going to the congressional option to Kings Point, then yes, you have to pass the physical fitness standards before they will ever even look at you. It's part of your application. We're not going to make you run a mile or do box jumps or pull ups to get in.
Okay, cool. And I was going to ask also, I know on most of the freighters, most of the positions do 4-hour watches. Is that what the cadets experience when they're doing their sea project on the state of Michigan?
So that depends on who is the official captain while they are on duty. Now, with the state of Michigan under operation, we have our official captain, Captain Mike Sigalski, who is also the master of the vessel. But Captain Sigalski can't be on the clock 24/7 for 90 days. So we have other people who have their captain's license who are official captains, including our faculty who become the captain of the ship, who trade out, who do those things. And it depends on who the captain is because some people would like to learn the different time clocks available. And so we work with them and we'll make sure they know when they should be on watch. Um, but we'll also make sure they understand that not every ship does their watches exactly the same.
Cool. And I was kind of curious, you mentioned that the students kind of have to choose which which track they want to follow, engine or deck, in that first year. In it, other than like the speakers you have come in, like the alumni and industry stuff, what kind of things does the academy do to help them make the best choice for themselves in
So
that
that's
first year?
that's a big part of where I come in. Because I speak a lot with people about making that choice. Because someone may really want to go deck. They want the glory, they want the captain's hat, they want to crest through those waves. But their information, such as transcripts, maybe test scores, have shown me that they don't necessarily have the we'll go with competency to build them to be successful at doing that. It's not that we don't want them to, but we want them to be successful.
Mhm.
And so that's a conversation I will have with people while they're applicants of, your math is a big precursor for success for us. And contrary to popular belief, you actually need a higher math placement for the DEC program. Everyone hears the word engineer and they think math, math, math. But the engineers do more intrinsic math. It happens in your head pretty naturally. Whereas our mates will do it more formula style, depth, distance, plotting a course. So they have to be able to work with that type of math. And so if you're someone that through your existence as a human being has not performed well in math, you're probably going to have a really hard time being a deck officer and getting through the program. And so those are things that when I get to see all your personal information and all the paperwork's in front of me, I look at all of it. I look at the letters of recommendation, who they're from, the experiences they've had, as well as their test scores and their transcripts. Did you have any college classes? Did you just have high school classes? Because again, we have cadets coming in who are 18 and who are 60. There's no way to compare them apples to apples. That's just not how it works. So we look at all the information very holistically as a human being, and we'll have those conversations as necessary. Because you may really want to be a mariner, but I really want you to be successful when you do it.
That makes a lot of sense. And it's not fun to be trapped in a career you are not suited for,
Correct. And
or invest all the time for that degree and then be unable to progress or complete it.
yes. And we have a very low attrition rate. So we bring in 60 cadets each fall, and we very rarely lose more than just a couple per class. Having a couple is very normal. People who got in over their heads or just weren't enjoying it like they thought they would. But we maintain about 98% of that class.
That's pretty
And
impressive.
yeah, but it's also because I make the joke that I'm the worst ex-girlfriend that none of my applicants have ever had. Because we work with you, we talk with you, we talk on the phone, we'll email with you. I'll even text with prospective students because it's a lot easier to talk about those things when you can be a human being. And so we try our best to make sure that we're getting everyone into the best fit program so they can be successful.
Well, that kind of segues me into a question that just occurred to me. You mentioned that you only take 60 a year. And I mean, to me, that is really just stunning and impressive because of you having that ability to spend that time like what you talked about. If you were bringing in a couple hundred people every term, there's no way that you could
You
give
have to
each
elbow your
applicant.
way through class every time to get
Right,
to.
right. Well, and you couldn't give each applicant that personal attention that you do provide for them and that support, because it really is kind of a form of support for students to be able to come and talk through their expectations and you to give them that reality. But I'm kind of curious, with only taking 60, how competitive is it to get into the program?
So that depends. Every year is different. And so some years we have some applicants that were like, no, and it's not as competitive. But for the most part, in the last few years especially, people have found out about Great Lakes Maritime Academy. And so we have a large amount of applicants, and it does get very competitive very quickly. The deck side, even more so because of that pilotage license. But last year, our class was full in January. And we did have a couple people rotate in and out, so we were able to pull from the wait list. But we have two different admission deadlines before we move into a rolling style. And one is November 1st and one is January 15th. And those pretty much hold every year. And so by the January 15th deadline, as we were reviewing applications, we were out of seats to give out to people.
And so could people still apply for that January 15th deadline right now?
They absolutely can. They can apply even past the deadline. We're all really human beings. So yes, we know that the deadline is there. It helps applicants a lot to have a deadline. And if you apply by January 15th, we guarantee your decision by the first week of February. Whereas after those deadline dates, then you're subject to our timeline.
Okay.
And yeah, and so if we don't have any seats to give out, maybe someone's been admitted, but they haven't accepted their seat. We may have to wait until they accept or decline their seat before we can admit someone. So then we're operating on someone else's timeline. And so when you're not at those deadline dates, you absolutely can still apply, but you're just subject to our timeline.
Okay. And then a question I also had is what percentage, if you know, what percentage of the graduates from your academy there stay on the Great Lakes as opposed to going overseas or into the Navy or
Yeah.
another part of the industry?
So this is the big debate about being the Great Lakes Maritime Academy and having so many cadets come from different places across the country. But the other academies don't necessarily license them or train them to work on inland waterways. So, of course, everyone on the Great Lakes wants our cadets who are more familiar with the Great Lakes. But for our cadets from various areas, they don't always want to stay there. And some of our cadets, even from Michigan, might find that the pay opportunity is better somewhere else. So they may want to stay, but financially, they make a different decision. So every graduating class is different. If you ask anyone operating on the Great Lakes, their answer will always be not enough of them.
Okay.
But it really depends year to year. It depends on what's going on. But we do very much encourage our cadets to stay on the Great Lakes, and we do reserve those industry nights. The entire first semester is reserved for Great Lakes industry because we want to promote where we are. Of course, we love our Great Lakes companies. But we also have to do them justice and allow them to navigate their career however they see fit, just like everybody else.
Cool. And then I had one more question that I had thought of. Again, anyone in the audience still, if you do have a question or a comment to share with Trisha, please put it in the chat. I don't mean to be dominating the questions, but of course I'm a boat nerd and I'm full of questions. Are the internships, the sea projects that they do on a commercial vessel or a naval vessel, are those paid, or are those like, because like in the museum world, internships are never paid. In other career fields, internships are paid. And so I'm just curious what the situation is for the cadets.
So that's a great question. And the cadets ask me that one a lot. And it all depends on the company. And so some places they take you on as an intern and they're not charging you money, but you're living and eating for free while you're on the ship and they feel that's enough. And in some cases it is. And then there are other companies that will pay the cadets. They are not yet officers while they're a cadet. So they usually pay them at the rate of an OS or an AB. And it really just depends on the company. A couple of what is deemed top tier large companies who are known for treating their employees really well, they hang on to their mariners for a long time. There aren't a lot of slots to get in there, but they hire almost exclusively from their cadet pool. And so they may not pay to have an intern on board because they know that the value of even being on their ship and being in that pool of cadets is very, very high.
That foot in the door.
Uh-huh.
And a chance to make that positive impression as a cadet. I can
Yes.
see the logic in that.
We tell all of our cadets that their commercial sailing time is a 90-day job interview. And so you need to get ready and we tell them, you don't have to always know what you're doing, but you got to be willing to learn. And if you stand there and just twiddle your thumbs, no one is going to want to hire you.
Because you are being evaluated, whether
Yeah.
you are aware of it or not.
Yes.
Well, I don't see any other questions, and I am going to confess to everyone still watching and to you, Trisha. I'm from Michigan, grew up all over the state. We moved every couple years. My dad was a Michigan State Park Ranger, and I have been a boat nerd since I was a kid. And if I had known about the academy there, I probably would not have joined the Army, and I may not have done a museum studies degree. I might have gone into working on one of those ships, because what a neat program you have. And I wouldn't have had to get a master's degree.
It is a wonderful program. And honestly, I hear that a lot. I have been across this country this fall and I have worked with interested people of all ages. And the first question I always ask is, have you ever heard of Great Lakes Maritime Academy? And 9.5 out of 10 times, it's a no. And even people all over Michigan have no idea that this academy is right in their backyard, and that I go to industry events and I have companies coming to me at a college fair saying, do you have any cadets I can hire? Your cadets are the best. Can I hire them? I have been chased down a high school hallway by a company HR representative because I was leaving too fast. And they were like, wait, I want to hire your cadets. Can I have your card? And I am not the right person for that, but I will always say yes. Whether it is increasing, making sure people know about us, or just making sure people know how awesome our cadets are, and that they're going into this incredibly unique field. And it gets paid really, really well, which is
I
another
was
thing.
going to ask you about that. Do you have a range of what cadets might expect when they are hired on as a starting level licensed
Yeah, so
person?
it's gonna make your museum studies heart a little sad there too, because our cadets, it does depend on where they're working and what company they're working for. But the average number that we give out for one of our cadets first year out of the academy, $80,000 annually, and that is before any overtime. The next year, especially for a unioned position, which most of them are, quite a bit of them, I'll say quite a bit. You're talking about a substantial wage increase of like 85 to 90 then. There is one company that I was made aware of that they are not a Great Lakes company. They're an ocean going company. And I will not say their name because this is not to badmouth them at all, but they are not known for treating their employees very well. And they know this. So they have decided to make up for it by not changing their ways, but paying exceedingly well. So they will have people signing on with them, and they will have a 2-year contract with a 30K signing bonus, and then a $120,000 salary before overtime.
That's amazing.
And it
Um,
goes up from there. So it's crazy. I had no idea that mariners did that well. And pilots, woo, woo,
they get more.
they get all the money. So if you ever watch any of the shows that you see someone who is helicoptered out to a cruise ship and then brings the cruise ship in, this is very popular in places like Port Everglades and things like that, with these giant cruise vessels, but they've also got protected waterways so you don't wreck the reef, they need a pilot on board. They're required to have a pilot on board. And most pilots specialize in just maybe one or two waterways, but a lot of them, as they gain experience and seniority, will specialize in just one waterway, and they can make like $10,000 a day. Now, they're not going to get to keep all of it. The ship gets some, and the waterway gets some, and the government gets some. But even if they keep a third of that, they make more than some people make in a month.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive. And I know there's pilots on the Great Lakes as well. I presume they're well paid as well.
Yeah.
And one of the advantages I can see as being a pilot is you probably almost always sleep in your own bed.
Yeah. Now you can be a pilot and stay aboard a vessel, especially for our graduates who maybe they don't specialize in that particular waterway, but they're part of crew. That means that that counts as having a pilot on board still. So they may not get paid as much as someone who might specialize in that waterway. And so they'll stay on the ship. But if you do have someone who's gained that seniority, they're a registered pilot and they're licensed for that waterway, yep, they work when they want to, they sleep in their own bed when they want to, and they are in charge of that specialized navigation, which includes not just protected waterways, but shallow, narrow, high trafficked. Um, all of those things are environments that our pilots have to deal with. Very high stress. Going through the locks, that's a pilot activity.
Well, and I can see how that is too, because I just know from friends I have on the ships that like every single ship, even if they were sister ships built in the same shipyard, handle a little differently.
Yes.
And even
They,
just like when you get a new car, it handles differently.
yep,
And so I presume like with these pilots, it's like having a new car every single time. But the
it is.
stakes are much higher than
And then is the wind blowing north or south? Does it, it's handling differently, but how differently?
exactly. And like most of the I'll say incidents we have at the locks is usually salties. And I think maybe sometimes that is because every single time it's an unfamiliar ship. They know the waterway, but every ship's just slightly different. And with a ship, you have to be, 5 miles ahead of yourself in terms of what you want to do navigation wise, because they don't turn on a dime like a yellow Cushman cart that you see at the locks. So that skill set just amazes me every single time.
It really is amazing. I have been on our simulator and they actually put me through the locks. And I had a 1,000-foot freighter. And you're right, you got to plan 5 miles ahead of yourself. We are not turning on a dime.
Yep.
But then they switched me over all of a sudden to a tugboat. And that is pin tight turning. And I won't lie to you, it was only on the simulator, but I crashed that little tugboat right into the wall of the locks. Um, we do have the opportunity that the cadets have a traditional throttle and helm, but also their Z drive, the azimuth throttle. And
Hmm.
so that a tugboat would actually have. And so the console switches all those things over and it does give you that experience, but the handling is so different. And so our cadets will do that on the simulator. They will go through the locks. And then when they're
And,
on our training vessel, they'll go up and down. They'll spend that whole engineer's day going up and down those locks.
and we kind of love it when that happens on Engineers Day, because if there are no freighters, there's at least the state of Michigan
Oh,
for
yeah.
the people to see.
We're there for it. You will probably see me there next year. And so that
Awesome.
way we can make sure, because we love our engineers and we love the experiences of them getting to go through it. And I get a lot of pictures on social media of whose ship is this? I call them in the wild photos.
Oh, cool.
So if anyone does see the state of Michigan, whichever waterway it's on, whether you're down in Detroit or you're in Port Huron or wherever, feel free to snap a photo. The state of Michigan goes with us, the Great Lakes Maritime Academy, and you can tag us on Facebook. I love seeing the in the wild photos.
That would be cool. Almost like a where's the state of Michigan, like where's Waldo? Or
That's
no, it's
pretty much
where's
what I
Carmen
feel the whole
Sandiego,
time.
right? That was the TV show. Where in the world is Carmen Sandiego?
Yes, put a little pin in my map of where they've gotten to, where they've been
Well, see,
seen.
that could even be fun when you get those in the wild photos, put them on your Facebook is like, where in the world is the state of Michigan?
Yes, anytime that somebody tags us in a photo and I see it, I will reshare it to our Facebook because it's really cool to see it from another perspective. And as someone who's involved with the cadets, I also love getting to creep about like who's on deck, who's doing what, whose
Very
hat
cool.
flew off.
Very cool. Well, I want to thank everyone who stuck with us. I hope you enjoyed the question and answer. I know I did because I was full of questions and I'm a big time boat nerd. Um, Real quick before we completely sign off, I'm going to share the links. I've got them posted in the chat if you want to cut and paste those somewhere for future reference before I end the meeting for everybody.